I decided this week, guys, because I hadn't had any topic suggestions, to go off on a bit of a tangent in relation to episode 2 of the podcast. And for this episode, I'm actually going to be discussing a trio of films that I saw, or that I have seen, within the last just over a month, give or take. A month and a quarter, shall we say. Those films in order being Cars 3, Transformers The Last Night, and the new Thomas and Friends movie, Thomas and Friends Journey Beyond Sodor. Good day one and all, and to one and all a good day. My name is Lewis, and welcome back to the Speedy Stuff Podcast. This episode, unlike the first episode, is going to be completely improvised. I don't have a script in front of me on my laptop screen. I've just got my laptop, my microphone, my external hard drive, and bugger all else. So yes, as I just stated in the intro to this episode, I'm going to be discussing a trio of films that I've seen within the last 4.5 to 5 weeks. Said films again being Cars 3, Transformers The Last Night, and Thomas and Friends Journey Beyond Sodor. Starting off with Cars 3, which I luckily got to see on its opening day here in the UK, which was July the 14th. I was actually surprised with how good a film Cars 3 actually was. I know that sounds kinda sorta patronising because, you know, it's Disney Pixar and anyone who shuns Disney Pixar ought to have a stake rammed up their arse. But, yeah, Cars 3 was a surprisingly enjoyable film, which seems an extremely unusual thing to say given the franchise that I'm discussing. You know, this is the Disney Pixar Cars franchise we're talking about here, which, let's be honest, that wasn't an overly popular franchise with critics prior to now. But I'm saying fuck it. Again. But yeah, all jokes aside, I did enjoy the film. I really honestly did. The pacing for it, I'm going to discuss real quick. The pacing for the film... The pacing was very well done for the film, but simultaneously, I feel like in relation to the pacing, they went a bit too quick with the film. I feel like the pacing was just a bit too rapid. Basically, what I'm trying to say with this is the film is billed at being a 1 hour and 39 minute, let's try this again. A 1 hour and 49 minute film. There we go, I got it right this time. Honestly, Cars 3, however, felt like it was an hour and a half in length. Which, you know, some people could argue that that's a good thing. Simultaneously, however, some people could argue that that's a bad thing. Me, I'm neither here or there with it. As I say, I think the pacing for the film was adequate for the runtime, and it honestly did feel like the film finished a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. It may or may not also add something to do with the fact that I walked out midway through the end credits, thinking that the film was over with, only to then see that someone had uploaded an apparent post-credits scene to Cars 3 on YouTube. Whoops. Oh dear. So there's that. But yeah, on the whole, Cars 3 I thought was a pretty good film. The writing was fairly decent. The character development was just as decent as the script writing. The animation, of course, was absolutely stellar. Of course it would be. This is Disney Pixar we're talking about. Of course the animation's going to be stellar. I was going to say something then, I decided against it. Oh dear. This is going terrifically well, isn't it? I don't think so. Anyways, so yes, Cars 3 on the whole, if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate it a 7, personally. It wasn't as good as the first Cars film from 2006, go figure, because let's be honest, the sequels are never as good as the first film of the franchise. Simultaneously, however, I do think that Cars 3, and let's be honest, we're all in the majority with this one, Cars 3 was definitely definitely a superior film to Cars 2, which... the less said about Cars 2, the better. Anyways, moving on to Transformers The Last Night, or as I'm now calling it, Transformers 5, Here's Your Refund. Words fail me with how much of a disappointment this film was. Words honestly fail me. This was such a shit movie. Now, if you've seen all my antics on my main YouTube channel, shameless plug, link in the description below, you will know that I am a huge Transformers fan. So if you have seen my antics on my main channel, you're probably sitting there thinking, Lewis, you enjoy the Transformers franchise. Why are you poorly criticising Transformers The Last Night? 2 reasons. 1, because I can poorly criticise it, and 2, because it deserves to be poorly criticised. I'm sorry, but it does. Transformers The Last Night was nothing short of a huge pile of dog shit. It really honestly was. It couldn't make its mind up as to where it was in relation to location and time period. It couldn't make up its mind on whether or not you wanted to root for any of the characters. You honestly couldn't make this shit up. You really honestly couldn't make this shit up. And yet somehow, an overly paid writing team at Paramount Studios did imagine this shit. And they're now rolling in more money than any of us. Which is extremely depressing. Especially again when you take into account of just how shit a movie Transformers The Last Night was. But yeah, it was so over the place, was this film. It really honestly was. You know, it starts off in Arthurian England, then it cuts to 21st century America, then we wind up in Scotland, then there's a flashback to World War II, then we somehow wind up at Stonehenge. What? How the we went from London to Stone fucking Henge. And this film has fucked me over so much I can't even remember where John Turturro's character was based in the film. Was it was it Cuba? It might have been Cuba. I can't fucking remember. But yeah, this film, I wanted to scream whilst watching this film. I really honestly did. I also did the stupid thing of seeing Transformers The Last Night after I saw Cars 3. So I went in a day to 2 completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Don't ask how, I just did. And I honestly feel like I got ripped off when I went to see Transformers The Last Night. And I'll tell you for why. When I went to see Cars 3, I went to see it in a recently opened cinema here in Cardiff. I managed to get a student ticket, which was £3, and I think it was a medium Pepsi for £1.50. So all told, my admission fee to see Cars 3 was £4.50. When I went to see Transformers The Last Night at a bigger, well-known branded cinema, I had to pay £4.50 just for the student ticket. And then I paid something like £3 for the medium Pepsi, which I was absolutely disgusted at. Should truth be told, as soon as she told me the price of it, I nearly threw the Pepsi back in the face of the attendant at the till. So all told, I paid £7.50 for 2.5 hours of disappointment. And the film wasn't even 2.5 hours long. I mean, it's billed at being 2.5 hours long, but it honestly felt like it went on for double that running time. At its least, it felt like it was going on for 3.5 hours. Which is never a good thing. Simultaneously as well, you know it's never a good thing when a member of your film's audience yawns 3 times consecutively within 5 minutes. I would like to point out this didn't happen in the first 5 minutes of the film. This happened somewhere in like the 3rd act of the film. the final third of the film. I yawned about 3 times consecutively within a 5-minute gap. You know your film's doing poorly if your cinema audience yawns 3 times consecutively within the space of 5 minutes. And the depressing thing is that Michael Bay once again got all the hate for it. I'll explain why I think it's depressing on my main channel. Again, shameless plug, link in the description below. I'm half hoping that maybe people will be able to see my side of the argument simultaneously. If you don't, then, that's your choice. Overall, however, if I had to rate Transformers The Last Knight on a scale of 1 to 10, to be perfectly fair, the scale would be cranked down into minus figures. That's how shit I thought Transformers The Last Knight was. At its best, it's worthy of a -3 out of 10. It really honestly is. It is shite. It really honestly is. You want to see 2.5 hours of complete and utter horse shit, go and see Transformers The Last Knight, because to be perfectly honest, I don't think even the DVD and Blu-ray sales will save it. Moving on from a franchise that started in the 1980s to a franchise that started way back when in the mid-1940s. I am now going to be discussing this year's Thomas & Friends film, Thomas & Friends Journey Beyond Sodor, which, to its credit, it wasn't that bad a flick, I don't think. Upon reflection, it's a 70-minute film, I'd like to point out, 70 to 72 minutes. And to its credit, it's actually not too bad a film. It actually took its running time, and it padded its running time out in such a way where it felt like the plot was paced in conjunction with its running time. So that's the one good thing that I'll give it. It honestly felt like it was a 70 to 72 minute film, which, again, the same as Cars 3, you could argue that that's a bad thing. Simultaneously, you could argue that that isn't a bad thing. But it really honestly was. Thomas & Friends Journey Beyond Sodor was, again, it was an okay film for the most part. There were a couple of saving graces. Again, the fact that the plot actually felt like it had been padded out properly. That was a silver lining for the film. The other silver lining to the film was Hugh Bonneville, who voiced one of the newer characters. Said character being called Merlin, and to be perfectly honest, they could not have picked a better character to voice Merlin even if they wanted to. Hugh Bonneville just took the concept of Merlin's character and brought him to life tenfold. It was extraordinary. What else was there? Oh yes, speaking of the new characters, some of the new characters that were introduced into the film, they were a bit of a mixed bag in more ways than one. So much so that, just like last year's Thomas & Friends film, Thomas & Friends The Great Race, the characters that were introduced in Journey Beyond Sodor had a lot of stick from the Thomas & Friends fan base and the press. And usually, however, in this case, it had more stick from the fan base than it did the press. Basically, I'm counting 5 new characters were introduced in Thomas & Friends Journey Beyond Sodor. We had a character called Theo, who, believe it or not, was actually autistic. That was actually one of his character tropes, that he was autistic. We had a character called Lexi, who I don't think it was specified anywhere, but I'm sure from what I saw of her, I'm sure she's got some sort of split personality disorder. Think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but in the form of a steam locomotive. I've got nothing. I genuinely have nothing. Merlin, we've already discussed. Merlin actually was a bit of an interesting character. I know I'm gushing about Merlin. To be perfectly honest, he was probably the best character in the film. Ah dear. But yeah, Merlin, from what I could tell, Merlin was delusional, because he thought he could turn himself invisible. And the whole story behind that was actually a really interesting story behind it. Basically, the locomotive that Merlin is based off of, back in World War II, it was fitted with 3 chimneys. So the exhaust of the locomotive hid not only the locomotive, but whatever train that said locomotive was pulling. during the Second World War, and it hid it from like the German fighter planes. It's an incredibly clever concept. But unfortunately, obviously, Merlin, Theo, and Lexi, they're supposed to be playing the roles of these experimental engines. So, clues in the name, experimental, the concept never caught on. We then also had two, I guess you could call them the villains. Oh no, wait, hang on, there was a sixth new character who was fucking annoying, who I'll cover later. We then cut to the two villains, Hurricane and Lexi. Not Lexi, sorry. Shit, what was her name? Hurricane and Frankie. That was it, Frankie. And apparently, I don't know if this is concrete or not, but I read somewhere that apparently Frankie was supposed to be a gender-fluid character. What does it fucking matter, honestly? It's a fucking diesel locomotive. That's like turning around and looking at Thomas the Tank Engine and saying, oh, it's a he, is it? Got a fucking cock and balls on him now, has he? It doesn't fucking matter. That's like season 21 of the show having a homosexual character. I will admit that would be a bit of an interesting twist. But again, what would be the point? Yes, I get that they're trying to be all gender equality and all, and basically all sorts of equalities. But does it really matter? Do they really actually need to pick up on every little equality range spectrum thingamadoodad? I honestly don't think they do. So the fact that they apparently made Frankie a gender-fluid character, completely pointless in my opinion. Anyway, I digress. We then had Hurricane, who, actually to Hurricane's credit, he had an interesting design. That was about it. And then we cut to possibly the most annoying character in the film. Some big Jamaican crane named Beresford. Now, the fact that he had a Jamaican accent wasn't what annoyed me. In fact, I love the Jamaican accent. I think it's possibly one of the best accents out there. The bit that annoyed me about Beresford was the fact that he was just there to pad out the running time of the film. And that's evident with a musical number that he and Thomas get involved in, as well as a rake of troublesome trucks, believe it or not. And the song is titled Who's Thomas? If you do go and watch Journey Beyond Sodor after this, take my advice, skip the scene where Beresford is introduced, because it is possibly the most fucking pointless scene ever put into a movie. Not just put into a Thomas the Tank Engine movie, but put into a movie full stop. It is just such a pointless and stupid exercise to have this scene in the film. And well, look, on the bright side, at least Mattel are going to make a mint out of selling toys of him. Thanks. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. Thomas and Friends Journey Beyond Sodor, again, if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give it a 6. At its highest, maybe a 6.5. The pacing for the film really used the 72 minutes of the film, and that's both with and without the musical numbers. Definitely without Who's Thomas. Because, as I've already said, that was a fucking pointless exercise. But yeah, naturally, it's not going to be as good as, say, Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, because let's be honest, in relation to the CGI era of Thomas the Tank Engine, Thomas and Friends Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure is basically going to be the crowning magnum opus. So yeah. In relation, though, to whether or not I'd recommend getting these 3 films on DVD or Blu-ray, Cars 3, yes, I would recommend getting it on DVD and Blu-ray. Transformers The Last Night, aka Transformers 5, here's your refund, whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting it on Blu-ray because it would just be a waste of your money. Maybe get it on DVD or as a digital download, if anything, for a laugh. So that you could just point at your screen for 2.5 hours going, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit, everything about this film is shit. And Thomas and Friends Journey Beyond Sodor, I don't think there are any Thomas films or Thomas DVDs in general here in the UK that are available on Blu-ray. So at least I would consider getting Thomas and Friends as a digital download on your iPad just to shut your kids up if you're a parent listening to this. I will admit, though, I personally will be going out and buying the DVD because I've got practically every Thomas and Friends special on DVD, from Thomas and the Magic Railroad right the way up to last year's Thomas and Friends film, which was Thomas and Friends The Great Race. So I at least will be going out and buying the DVD. But yeah, that's pretty much it, to be perfectly honest. Episode 3, I don't honestly know if I'll have a recommended topic for me to suggest in episode 3 of the podcast. If I don't, then I don't overly need to panic, because I already have an idea of what I want to discuss for episode 3 of the podcast anyway. Maybe even episode 4 if I do get a topic suggestion. In fact, actually, I'm looking at a piece of merchandising from what I'm looking to discuss in either episode 3 or episode 4 of this podcast. And, well, put it this way, it is going to be a doozy, potentially. It could be the longest episode of the podcast yet. And I have actually partially covered this topic in a video on my main channel for the 3rd time. Shameless plug, link in the description below. That said, that's pretty much where we shall be leaving off. I apologise for wasting your time and bending your ears. If you have enjoyed what you've heard in episode 2 of the podcast, please do make sure to subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and like the Facebook page. 4th shameless plug, the link to the Facebook page will be in the description below also. You know, maybe like this episode. Share it with your friends. I have also been thinking as of late that maybe I can get this podcast to go somewhere on SoundCloud, so keep an eye out on that. But until episode 3, which will be going live in a fortnight's time, which will be... what day will it be? It will be Friday, September the 8th, 2017. This has been Lewis of the Speedy Stuff Podcast, saying thank you all very, very much for listening. I apologise for wasting your time, and I shall see you all, or rather, you shall hear me, all one person of you, in episode 3 of the podcast. So until a fortnight from now, adios.